are going to speak about a subject that most of us considered unimportant when we were in school for various reasons. First is this is not a scoring subject, so it doesn't help us push up our percentage. Secondly, it is not a subject that will help us find a job or a career. And thirdly, it is always taught in a very boring manner. So various reasons, but is history really unimportant? That is what we'll try and find today. Who are we? From where did we come? How did we reach here? Answers to these questions constitute our history, and through them we recognize ourselves. A country is a land within certain geographical boundaries. This country becomes a nation when people living in that area connect with each other through the strong bonds of culture. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar says that to create a nation, people should have shared view of the past and common vision of the future. And this shared view of the past comes only from the understanding of our history. And this history gives us our identity. So history is anything but unimportant. That much we can definitely agree on. And if we don't know our true history, then we can never find our real identity. And a nation without identity is like an anchorless ship or a body without a backbone. And there is another important thing that arises out of lack of understanding of our identity. And that is other people impose on us an identity that is convenient for them. And that is exactly what has happened with our country. Many imperial powers have imposed on us identities that were convenient for them, that were good for their self-interest. And this has caused severe damage to our psyche, to our nation, and to our civilization. And that is why it is very important to understand what are these fake identities imposed on us and remove them once and for all. And find our true identity, because India definitely has a great true identity. Only thing is we have to find it. So first fake identity that was imposed on us is whatever quality and value you have in your country has been given to you by people coming from the West. And where did this identity arise from? It is from what I call the mother of all distortions, and that is Aryan invasion theory. So what is this Aryan invasion theory? Where did it come from? When did it come? To understand all these things, we have to go back to the beginning of the 17th century. In the year 1614, Sir Thomas Roe, an officer of the British East India Company, came to the Darbar of Badshah Jahangir and asked for permission to trade in India. And after they got the permission, they opened their outlets in Madras, Calcutta, and Surat. And they started trading. That was a time when Britain and Europe were in the midst of Renaissance period. So there were many people who were interested in learning new things. They were very curious to find out how the world worked and so on and so forth. As people like this started coming in larger numbers to India, they were greatly impressed by the antiquity and richness of Indian culture. There were people like William Jones, Warren Hastings, who really were extremely impressed by Indian culture. They started studying Indian culture and history, and they became the greatest admirers of our heritage. They also found that Indian languages, and especially Sanskrit, has got great similarity with European languages like Greek, Latin, and all other languages also. So they went into the depth of this subject and they found that this similarity is not superficial, but it's a very deep structural similarity. So these languages are like sisters. And they found that from Sri Lanka to Iceland, in this big area, many languages in various countries were all related to each other. So they created a language family called Indo-European languages. They also realized that Rigveda is the world's oldest literature and Sanskrit is the world's oldest language. So in their heart, they kind of accepted that all these languages must have evolved from Sanskrit, because Sanskrit being the oldest language. But William Jones conjectured that since this area is so vast, there must be a mother language which must have been spoken somewhere in the middle of Sri Lanka to Iceland. And then they thought of area which we call as steppes to the south of Russia in the Eurasian mountains. But this was only a conjecture, and this didn't become a mainstream narrative at that time, because those people were their love for Indian culture was still in full bloom. William Jones had actually translated Shakuntal into English. Then from the English translation, it got translated to German. And in the entire Europe, there was a wave of respect and appreciation for Sanskrit literature and Indian culture and heritage. To the extent that Voltaire, one of the greatest philosophers of our time, has gone on record saying that European civilization was born on the banks of the Ganges. So to that extent, they kind of understood that India is the mother of origin of civilization. But as time went by, 1757, they won the war at Plassey, and 1818 they defeated Marathas, and at that time they were pretty sure that now their rule in India is going to last for a long time, and India is going to be the jewel in the crown of British Empire. So now the appreciation that they had so far shown for the Indian culture and civilization became very inconvenient for them, because they couldn't possibly accept that the culture and language of their subjects is better and superior to their own culture and language. So they had to find a way out of this predicament. They also realized that from thousands of miles away, England cannot rule India for a long time only on the basis of military prowess. So British were very smart people and very cunning people. So they found a way out of this, and they decided that they will destroy India's self-respect and confidence and love for their own language and culture. And they will make Indians accept that European culture and British culture is superior. And in fact, the British Raj is the God's gift for India, something of that sort. And to do this, they decided to attack two main strengths of our civilization, and they were education and history. So the task of attacking our education system was taken up by Lord Macaulay, who completely destroyed our Gurukul system and started education through English medium and created only armies of clerks to serve the British Empire. So the epistemology of Indian civilization, which was mainly through the Gurukul system, was completely destroyed. We couldn't create any new language, new knowledge, and we were dependent on the West for all the sources of knowledge, and only knowledge that was given to us was enough to work as clerks for the British Empire. So that was as far as the education is concerned. The job of attacking our history was taken up by a person called Max Muller. I'm sure everybody has heard his name. And then he took up the conjuncture which William Jones had created, that people from the West, from Eurasia or the steppes, must have created the basic, the mother language of all Indo-European languages. And then he created a theory that people from this steppes area, who were Aryans, came to India via Central Asia, Iran, via that route, defeated the local people who were not very advanced and progressed. Aryans were the ones who were wise and cultured and everything. They came here and then they gave Indians their language, that is Sanskrit, and their culture, that is the Vedic culture. So it was a complete turnaround from their earlier appreciation for the Indian culture, and the acceptance by people like Voltaire that in fact the European civilization had originated from the Indian civilization. So now they completely turned it 180 degrees and said that people coming from the West, white people, Aryans were white with golden hair, blue eyes, they came to India and gave Indians the Vedic culture and Sanskrit language. Max Muller gave a certain timeline to this so-called Aryan invasion. He said that Aryans came to India in 1500 BCE, before Common Era, and they created Vedas, especially Rig Veda, in 1200 BCE, before Common Era. So that was a timeline which was purely a guesswork. There was no basis, there was no evidence, nothing at all. And this is a fact which Max Muller himself later admitted. He said that this timing which I suggested, 1500 BC, was purely out of imagination. And I definitely don't have any evidence at all for this. And no power on earth will ever be able to decide when the Vedas were written or created. Whether in 2000 BC, 3000 BC, 3500 BC, this is something Max Muller has himself written down. But still we accept and live with the theory that Aryans came to India in 1500 BC. So that is the success which the British had in shoving it down our throat, this entirely false theory, basically. Now, when this theory was first promulgated in around 1830, Indus Valley civilization was not yet discovered. So the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, those two sites were first discovered in 1922. And then it was found that this is a very big civilization, and it came into existence around 3500 BCE, reached its pinnacle in 2600 BCE, and became extinct in around 1500 BCE. So this discovery of its extinction around 1500 BCE was like a eureka moment for the supporters of Aryan invasion theory, because it coincided with the timing of Aryan invasion that Max Muller had given, which was also 1500 BC. So now they again took another somersault, because initially they had said that Aryans were the wise and cultured people, and they came to India and gave backward Indian people their language and their culture. But now that initially their purpose was to destroy India's self-confidence and self-respect. But by 1922, they had more or less achieved that objective. Indians had already accepted that the British were superior and we had to learn everything from the West. Now, in 1922, they wanted to make sure that the British Raj will stay in India for a long time. And for that, they wanted to create more and more divisions in our country. So now the somersault that they took was that Indus Valley civilization was a Dravidian civilization, which was a very evolved civilization. And the Aryans who came from the West were nomads, barbarians. They destroyed this Indus Valley civilization, which was India's original Dravidian civilization, and pushed the Dravidian people to the south. So because of this new theory of Dravidian civilization being defeated by the invading Aryans, they created new fault lines in our country. So like North versus South. This was a non-existing fault line earlier, but now it was created because they told the people in the South that you are the original Dravidian Indian citizens, and these people coming from the West, Aryans, have destroyed your culture and pushed you to the South. So Hindi versus Tamil, Sanskrit versus Tamil, North versus South, upper caste versus lower caste, because they said that upper castes are the Westerners who came from Eurasia, and lower castes are the original inhabitants of our country. Then Adivasis versus everybody else, because they also conjectured that Adivasis are the original inhabitants of India. So all these fault lines and all these differences were created only out of this one Aryan invasion theory. And that is why this is a very, very dangerous belief that has kind of entered our education system, our belief system, that Aryans came from the West and destroyed the Dravidian civilization. And because of that, all these fault lines are still working very strongly in our country. Like Rahul Gandhi recently said that India is not a nation but a union of states. So the next step of this argument would be the 5 southern states should separate from India because they are in any case not the same as the North Indians, which is actually totally wrong. But based on this fake Aryan invasion theory, an argument like this can definitely be made in the coming days. Then there is a red corridor from Pashupati to Tirupati, which is a corridor of Naxalite movement, and it's full of jungles and where Adivasis live, Vanavasis live, and they are being told that you are the inhabitants and everybody else is from outside, so you should claim your own country, which is a red corridor. And this Naxalite movement, their foundation of their argument is again the Aryan invasion theory. So this Aryan invasion theory is causing huge damage to our country, and it will continue to cause damage to our country unless we wipe it out from the consciousness of India. And for that, we have to establish that it is a completely wrong and fake theory. And in my book Asatyameva Jayate, I have taken a 360-degree angle of how this theory is completely wrong. There is not a single evidence to prove that Aryans came from the West. It's very difficult to believe, I know, that this theory, which has existed for so many years, I think now about almost 2 centuries, doesn't have a single iota of evidence to prove that it is right. And still it is being accepted as a mainstream narrative of history of India. And but if you look at archaeology, so the excavation that has been done in the Indus Valley civilization, incidentally, we have to stop calling it Indus Valley civilization. It should be called as a Sindhu Saraswati civilization, because Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, first 2 sites that they were discovered, they were on the banks of the river Indus or Sindhu. And that's why it was called as Indus Valley Civilization or Sindhu Sanskriti. But later on, almost 2,500 sites of that civilization have been found. And more than 75% of those sites are on the banks of river Saraswati, which is a dried paleo channel of Ghaggar Hakra river, as we call it today. But it has been proved beyond doubt that this paleo channel is nothing but the Saraswati of Rigveda. So it must be called a Sindhu Saraswati civilization. And in the archaeological excavation at all these sites, if there was any truth in the Aryan invasion or Aryan migration theory, then in the various levels of excavation, which represented different time periods, we should have seen a big change in the lifestyle of those people, in the language of those people, in the religious beliefs of those people, the way those people dressed. Because if it was a complete transition from one culture to the other, then this transition must have revealed itself in the architecture, in the archaeology. But there is absolutely no change as far as the lifestyle and religious beliefs and the dressing and the cuisine of the people living in the Indus Valley era, and even people living there today. So in the excavation, we found some statues of women with bangles in their hand. And our Indian women even today wear bangles. There was a sindoor in their mang, in the statues, which again is a practice which is followed even in today's India. We also found some tandoors for cooking, which is a common practice even today. So you take any aspect of lifestyle, there is a consistency and continuity for the last at least 5,000 years in India. And through archaeology doesn't present even one evidence, even an iota of evidence to prove that somebody came from outside, from the West, destroyed the existing civilization and took its place. Similarly, there is textual evidence. So Rigveda is the oldest text in the world. And if Aryans came from the West and then created Rigveda after coming to India, there would have been some references of their journey of thousands of kilometers from the south of Russia to India via Central Asia, Iran, etc. So there are some references to that journey, some mention of those geographical areas, some mention of having found something totally different after their arrival in India, something which they were not accustomed to. Nothing of that sort, not even a single mention of such things appears in the Rigveda. So it's simply not believable that people came from a place which is thousands of kilometers away, walked all their way or came on the horses all their way to India, and they don't mention even one reference about their journey. So it's impossible. Then there is genetic evidence. That again is a very huge subject, so today we will not cover it. But in my book, I have given a very detailed account as to how genetically also it has been proved that Indians all over India belong to the same genetic map, and this genetic consistency also has been maintained right from the Sindhu Saraswati times till today. So there is no evidence to show that some outsiders have come and the genetic makeup of Indians had changed over a period of time. So you take archaeological evidence, you take textual evidence, you take genetic evidence. There is another very important evidence that I want to share, and that is the evidence that we get from the river Saraswati. In Rigveda, the highest importance is given to river Saraswati. So Saraswati is mentioned about 90 times, whereas river Ganga is mentioned only about 4 or 5 times. So you can imagine how important Saraswati was to the people to the rishis who created those Vedic hymns. And Rigveda was created on the banks of Saraswati in the area of Kurukshetra, which is in today's Haryana. And it is mentioned in Rigveda very clearly, and we can conclude that those rishis were living there. And that area was called as Brahmavarta in those times. And area towards the east around Ganga and Yamuna used to be called as Aryavarta. So if river and Saraswati has been mentioned as a very, very powerful and mighty river in the Rigveda many times. They have mentioned that it comes down from Himalayas onto the ground. On its way, it breaks large boulders like the stem of a lotus flower. So that kind of power they have attached with river Saraswati, and they have written that it's a river flowing from Himalayas to the sea continuously. Now, in the study of Indus Valley civilization, it has been now accepted that Indus Valley civilization became extinct because Saraswati river became completely dry. There are various reasons why it became dry, which I have covered in my book. But around 2000 BCE, the river Saraswati became completely dry, extinct, and that's why the Sindhu Saraswati civilization also became extinct. So now, Max Muller says that Rigveda was created by the people coming from the west in 1200 BCE. Saraswati became extinct in 2000 BCE. And Rigveda says that Saraswati is a very, very powerful and mighty river. So these things simply don't add up, because a river which became extinct 800 years ago, how can it be mentioned in Rigveda as a very, very mighty and powerful river? And how can it be so important to the Vedic people? So you take any evidence, everything tells you in unanimous terms that this theory is fake. On the other hand, there is enough evidence for the out of India theory. So originally what Voltaire had accepted, that the flow of culture and language went from India to the West, that is now called as the out of India theory. And to prove that, there are umpteen evidences, which again I have covered in the book. So I will not spend more time on that just now. So in this one Aryan invasion theory, there were two identities that were thrust on us. One was everything that of value that you have has been given to you by white people coming from the West. That is number one. And number two is original Indian civilization was Dravidian, and it was destroyed by people coming from the West, Aryans. And that's why India is a divided country. So both these identities originate from one theory, that is Aryan invasion theory, which has not a single evidence to support. So we must understand that. Now going to the third identity that was imposed on us, again, which was very, very damaging and detrimental to us. In the year 2009, A.K. Antony, who was a defense minister in those days, he told the Indian Parliament that we don't create any roads and bridges or any infrastructure in the border area with China, so that Chinese soldiers should not use that infrastructure and attack India. So I think it shows such a lack of confidence and defeatist attitude that you don't need to say anything more on that. Australian cricket captain Ian Chappell had once said that in our times, Indian team had very good players, but they were almost apologetic while competing. So they were not fighters. They didn't want to compete. So where does this defeatist mentality, this self-loathing, this inferiority complex, where does it come from? it comes from another fake identity that was imposed on us, and that is India's history is a story of defeats. We have always been told that invaders came from the northwest. They kept on attacking us. Every single time we were defeated, they enslaved us, and India's history is history of defeats. Now, this again we need to question and really find out whether there is any truth in this narrative, because this has also created huge damage to our country. So, first known invasion on India in the recorded history happened in 810 BCE when Assyrian queen Semiramis. Assyrian Empire was a very big empire, and Queen Semiramis attacked India. So first she sent some people in the garb of traders to find out the situation in India. And they told her that King Satyavrat of Punjab is a very, very powerful king, and he has a very strong army. And especially its unit of elephants is very, very strong and powerful. So she postponed her plan to attack India by about 2 years. And she thought that she's playing a very smart trick by she attached the buffalo skin together and created attached kind of uniform, if you may call it, and he draped it over the camels, because her army had camels. She came from Middle East, to make them look like elephants. And then she attacked India with 30,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, 1,000 chariots, and 1,000 camels dressed as elephants. And her army met Satyavrat's army on the banks of river Sindhu, Indus. And King Satyavrat routed her army completely, because those camels couldn't take the heat of Indian plains. They started running helter-skelter. And Satyavrat's elephants attacked Assyrian army and created a complete rout of the invading army. They ran away. Indian kings always followed the principle of Dharma Yuddha. So if the opponent is running away, retreating, then you don't follow and kill them. You always allow them to go back. That is the concept of Dharma Yuddha that Indians followed. So King Satyavrat allowed the queen to go back. But this was definitely not a defeat for India, but it was a resounding victory for India. Then 535 BCE to 513 BCE, there was a very big empire called Persian Empire. We all have heard of it. So Cyrus the Great and Darius the Great, they also attacked India during this period. And they couldn't make any headway beyond the Indus River. So there was again no defeat for India. Alexander's invasion we all have heard of, and British historians have described it as Alexander's conquest of India, which is completely misleading, because Alexander made a very, very stiff resistance from a very small kingdom on the border of India. The king's name was Puru, or Porus, as the Greeks called him. And there was a very fierce fight. And generally, there is not an agreement that whether Porus was defeated or it was something like a drawn match. But all historians are unanimous on one thing, that it was the most difficult battle in Alexander's life. And after that difficult battle, they had no morale left to go further in India and take on the mighty Nanda army. So after the war with Porus, Alexander went back. So it can't be called as a defeat for India. Then he left behind some generals like Seleucus and Demetrius. The Seleucus was defeated by Chandragupta Maurya. Demetrius was defeated by Pushyamitra Shunga. So they were all victories for India, not defeats for India. Then there were some invaders like Scythians, Indo-Parthians, Kushans. They attacked India. Most of them could never advance into the mainland of our country. Only the Kushans were successful, but they were successful only after they became completely Indian. So they accepted Buddhism as their religion. They started following, they took Hindu names, they started following Hindu and Buddhist practices. And for all practical purposes, they became Indian. And then they were successful in coming to the mainland India. But they were also defeated by the invading Huns. And in the 5th century Common Era, the Huns, there were waves of Huns that destroyed major empires in the world. Like under Attila the Hun, they destroyed the Roman Empire. We all have heard about it. At the same time, Mihirakula, under him, Huns also attacked India. But in India, they were defeated resoundingly by Skandagupta, Yashodharman, and Narsinghagupta, because that was the Gupta Empire period at that time. So again, it was victory for India, not defeat for India. Whereas Huns defeated all other big empires like Roman Empire, but in India they faced defeat. So how can we say that India is a history of defeats? Now we come to the Islamic invasions, because that is the biggest part of our history. So to understand how India reacted, or how India faced, or how India performed against the Islamic invasions, we have to understand that on the backdrop of what happened in the other parts of the world. Because unless we have some reference point, we can't really determine how India performed. So after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 BCE, they started the campaigns for spread of Islam from 634 BCE. And it was like a human tsunami. I mean, in just a matter of 125 years, they destroyed everything that came in their way and won over a big, vast area, right from Afghanistan in the east to Spain in the west. On their east, they had a very, very strong empire called Persian Empire. On their west, they had another equally strong empire called Byzantine Empire, or Eastern Roman Empire. These empires were in existence for almost 1,000 years by that time. And in spite of the existence of such strongly entrenched empires on both their sides, these Arabs won this completely, almost more than half of the world in a matter of 125 years. Just to understand, they won the entire Iran, which was the base of Persian Empire, in 8 years. Iraq, they won in 2 years. Egypt, they won in 4 years. Syria and Palestine, they won in 8 years. Entire North Africa, they won in 50 years. And the entire Central Asia, which was the toughest battle for them, because those people were also very rugged and violent. But this entire Central Asia, they won, places like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, they won in about 100 years. And since all these battles happened simultaneously, this entire area from Afghanistan to Spain, they won in 125 years. This was itself a miracle, but even a bigger miracle than this was that in this entire area, they made all the people living in this area to accept Islam as their religion and accept Arabic as their language. This had never happened before, or I don't think it ever happened after that also. That in such a big area, people were made to change their religion and change their language. And that was the biggest success of Islam in such a huge area. Now, on the backdrop of these facts, now let us figure out how India responded to the Islamic invasions. We are generally told that the first invasion that happened was on Sindh, and it was in the year 711 Common Era. But that is not correct. The first invasion on India happened in 636 Common Era, 636 CE. Because India, flying Islamic flag on India was very, very dear to Prophet Muhammad himself. So he had told his followers that those who will fly Islamic flag on the soil of India will definitely go to the Jannat. So the campaign against India was started in 636 Common Era. And the first attack happened by the way, sea route on Thane, which is near Mumbai. And it came from Oman. And this attack was repulsed and there was no success for the Islamic invaders. Then second attack happened on Bharuch, which is in Gujarat, again from the sea route. There again they were defeated. After that, about at least 8 to 10 times, they attacked Sindh. And every single time they were routed. They were convincingly defeated. So till 711, from 636 to 711, which makes it about 75 years, every single time they faced defeat. They were never successful. So this period of 75 years, if you compare with 125 years in the rest of the world, you see a stark difference that everywhere else, big empires collapsed. And here, small kingdoms in India fought resolutely and actually defeated the Islamic invaders. In fact, at that time, India didn't have one central power like a Persian Empire or a Byzantine Empire. We had small kingdoms like Gurjar Pratihars in the west, Palas in the east, Rashtrakoot and Chalukya in the south. But there was not a single central strong empire which could have fought with the Islamists. But still, for the first 75 years, there was no success for Islamic invaders. Then in the year 711, Muhammad bin Qasim attacked Sindh. He fought with Raja Dahir, who was the king of Sindh at that time. Again, it was a very, very fierce battle. Raja Dahir was advised by his ministers that for the time being, let us retreat because this Arab army seems to be very strong. And then we'll come back and fight them again. But he said, no, nothing doing. Now I am standing between other kingdoms of India and the Arabs. And if I win, the success will be mine. And if I lose, the history will remember me as someone who fought for the country. He unfortunately lost. But even more unfortunately, our country never remembered him. And his confidence that the country will remember me as a king who fought for the country was not proved right, because our history has always been distorted and we were never told about the real heroes of our history. So Raja Dahir was forgotten. Now coming to what happened after these people won in Sindh. We generally feel, and we have been told, that after these waves after waves of Islamic invaders kept on coming and we kept on losing. That is the essence of history that we understand. But after Sindh was won over, Muhammad bin Qasim was sent back, and another general called Junaid al-Rahman was sent to India, and he was told to now go deep inside India and win the entire country. So he started his foray into Rajputana, which is adjacent to Sindh. Then there was a king called Bappa Rawal of Mewar. He realized the threat that these Arabs are going to cause, and he collected a confederation of kings: Gurjar Pratihar king Nagabhatta, Rashtrakoot king Jaisingh Varman, Chalukya king Pulakesin, and he himself. These 4 kings came together and they met the Arab army on the Sindh Rajputana border, and they comprehensively defeated the Arabs. So much so that Arabs started running back. Bappa Rawal followed them, and expanded his kingdom in the areas of right up to Iran. He established a city of Rawalpindi as an outpost to protect India from any further invasions like this. So Rawalpindi comes from Bappa Rawal actually. But our history has never spoken about Bappa Rawal, unfortunately, hasn't spoken about this battle where Arabs were defeated. Now, after losing on the west, Arabs also opened another front towards the north, and they started approaching Punjab and those areas. There again, King Lalitaditya of Kashmir, he met the Arab army in Kangra in Punjab, and again comprehensively defeated the Arabs. And he also expanded his kingdom towards the areas of Dardistan, Bukhara, and Balkh. Lalitaditya was also a very big and powerful king, about which hardly anybody has heard in our country. So all attacks from the west were defeated. Another front, Arabs had opened from the north or northwest. Their army, which won in Iran and captured Iran by the year 650, they further started encroaching in India from that side. And there were two small kingdoms on the border called as Kabul and Zabul. They were known as Hindu Shahi kingdoms. And these Hindu Shahi kingdoms fought with the invading Arab armies right from 650 to 870 CE. So almost 220 years, they didn't allow this Arab army to enter India. They kept resisting them at the border itself. Again, now compare with 125 years of what happened in the world and these 220 years, two small kingdoms, very, very small kingdoms. They didn't allow the Arabs to put a foot on the Indian soil. They also, afterwards, the attacks of Turks started in the year 966. Turks started attacking them from Afghanistan. They fought the Turks from 966 CE to 1026 CE, again for almost 100 years. So 650 to 1026, almost 400 years, they didn't allow the invaders to enter India. These were the two very, very small kingdoms compared to the big empires like Byzantine and Persian Empire. I think by no stretch of imagination, you can call India's history as a history of defeats. It is a history of heroic resistance, but we have never been told about it. That is the unfortunate part. After the Arab invasions, then the Turkish invasion started when Mahmud of Ghazni started attacking India around 1010, around that time. We know that he won many battles in India, that is known history. But what we don't know is he also lost many battles. That has never been told to us. The biggest of these losses was against the King Vidyadhar of Kalanjar and Khajuraho. It was again a resounding defeat which Mahmud of Ghazni faced and actually ran away from the battlefield. After Ghazni's death, his nephew, Sayyid Salar Masood, he attacked India with an army of more than 1 lakh soldiers. He won some areas and then he parked himself at Satrik in Uttar Pradesh. And there was a small kingdom where King Suhail Dev was ruling. His kingdom was known as Shravasti. He had also heard of the atrocities of this Turk army. So he collected 21 small kings which were in that area to come together. He convinced them to come together. And this confederation of 21 kings fought with the army of Sayyid Salar Masood and completely routed him, and killed Sayyid Salar Masood. And after that, the Turks again didn't come back for about 150 years. So this was somewhere around 1035 maybe. And the next invasion happened when Muhammad Ghori attacked India in 1173. So there was a big gap of 150 years. What we have been told that Islamic invaders kept on coming and kept on winning is a complete lie. When Muhammad Ghori came, he had heard about the loot and the plunder that Muhammad Ghazni had done at Somnath. And because of that, Muhammad Ghazni had become a big hero in the Islamic world. So Muhammad Ghori wanted to also, bask in that glory and collect that loot from Somnath. So he decided to attack Somnath first. And in Gujarat, there was a Chalukya kingdom at that time, and the queen regent was Naiki Devi, because the king was a kid, and she was taking care of the kingdom. She defeated Muhammad Ghori at the foot of when he attacked her kingdom, and it was again Muhammad Ghori somehow saved himself and ran away. That was in 1173. He came back only in 1191, and never again in his life he attacked Gujarat. So, but we have never heard of Naiki Devi. That's again a very unfortunate part, that Muhammad Ghori was so badly defeated by Naiki Devi, but we don't know Naiki Devi. We know Muhammad Ghori, of course, very well. Then, in the first battle at Taren, Muhammad Ghori was again defeated by Prithviraj Chauhan. And only in the second battle of Taren in the year 1192, he could defeat Prithviraj and kill him. And then in the year 1206, his general Qutubuddin Aibak, he established Delhi Sultanate in India, at Delhi. So the first Islamic Sultanate in India was established in the year 1206. Till that time, they could never establish a kingdom in India, in the mainland of India. So 636, they started attacking India. The first Sultanate that they established in India, on the mainland of India, was in the year 1206, which is about 570 years. Now again, you compare with what happened outside. Iran 8 years, Iraq 2 years, Egypt 4 years, Spain 4 years, India 570 years, and still the Delhi Sultanate was controlling only a small part around Delhi. It was not as if the entire India was won over by the Islamic invaders. From that time onwards, Aurangzeb died in the year 1707. That is where the Mughal Empire actually, for all practical purposes, it ended. We can take 1750, till that time some life was there maybe. So from 1206 to 1750, in these 500 years again, they could never establish their political rule on the entire land of India. Like Assam was always free under Ahoms. There was Vijayanagar Empire in the south. There was Shivaji Maharaj in Maharashtra and other parts. So entire India never was conquered by the Islamic invaders, even till 1750. So 636 to 1750, 1100 years, India always kept resisting. India's history is not a history of defeats, but it is a history of heroic resistance. That we need to tell our children, that we need to teach our future generations, that while the big empires like Byzantine Empire and Persian Empire collapsed like pack of cards, India fought for 1100 years and never ever allowed the invaders to control the entire land of our country. More important than that, in other parts of the world, people converted themselves to Islam and accepted Arabic as their language. Whereas in India, Indians were never completely converted. Our Hinduism remained thriving religion. We never gave up our languages. So cultural imperialism was also resisted. Political imperialism was also resisted. So India's history by no means is a history of defeats, but it's a history of resistance. If we understand this, then all this defeatist mentality and all this self-loathing will wither away, and we will, rise as a very, very strong and powerful nation that India actually has always been and still is. So that's why understanding history and removing these misconceptions and distortions is very, very important. Then another false identity that has been imposed is that of Bhaichara and Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb in the Islamic period, because it washes away or tries to wash away the terrible atrocities that were committed by the Islamic invaders, barbaric Islamic invaders, on Hindus, Buddhas, Jains, Sikhs. All this is completely wiped away as if it never happened. It is called as negationism. So this negationism of atrocities that happened in India needs to be again completely understood and corrected. How bad were these atrocities, and how badly Indians were tortured? To understand that, let's see a few facts. Historian K.S. Lal has estimated that from 1000 CE to 1500 CE, 80 million Hindus were massacred. 8 crore Hindus were massacred in just 500 years, from 1000 CE to 1500 CE. Hindu Kush mountains, we have heard about it. Hindu Kush is called the killer of Hindus. It means killer of Hindus. Why this name was given to Hindu Kush? Because lakhs of men, women, and children were taken via this route to Central Asia and Iran as slaves to be sold in the slave market. And due to the extreme cold conditions in that area, many of them used to die. And that's why this mountain is called as a Hindu Kush, or the killer of Hindus. So what kind of slavery was imposed on us? What kind of torture was imposed on us? In the town of Ghazni in Afghanistan, there is a tower under which it is written that Duktare Hindustan, Nilame do dinar. The daughters of Hindustan are sold for just two dinars each. So that is the kind of slavery, that is the kind of rape, plunder, torture that Indians had to face. And making an effort to simply negate everything and say that nothing like this happened is something which is very, very unjust to the memory of those who suffered this torture. So this correction also has to be made in our history. Who did this negation? Who were behind this negationism? Because this is not a creation of British, but it is a creation of our own people. During the pre-independence and also post-independence era, there were three main streams who kind of contributed to our historiography, or the knowledge of history. One was Congress, of course, because Congress was the dominant party post-independence as well as pre-independence. And their understanding of history, or their narrative of history, was articulated by one Mr. M.N. Roy. He was the one who articulated the Congress's point of view of history. And M.N. Roy himself was a communist, actually. He was in Congress for a few years, but later on he formed Indian Communist Party. So he was the one who contributed to this negationism. Second stream was Islamic scholars, the Deoband School and Aligarh School. Their narrative history was articulated by one Mr. Muhammad Habib, father of Irfan Habib, who again was a communist. So Islamic narrative history was also articulated by a communist. And then the third is communists themselves. In the year 1969, when Indira Gandhi's government lost its majority in the parliament, the Communist Party had helped her to save her government. And in return, they didn't ask for any important ministry or big ministry like finance ministry or defense ministry or external affairs ministry. They asked for the education ministry, because they knew that if you want to control the minds of coming generations, then education must be in our hand. And that's why they put Nurul Hasan, a communist, as an education minister. And in the same year, 1969, Jawaharlal Nehru University was established, JNU. And the JNU historians like Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, and the entire cabal, they and Nurul Hasan worked in a very, very coordinated manner, like one team, and created this entire narrative of Bhaichara and Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb and so on and so forth, which completely negated the torture, rape, plunder, and destruction of temples, everything that Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, and Buddhas suffered. So it is a creation of mainly communist historians. This entire narrative is, we can't blame the imperial powers or anyone from outside. It is our own creation. What are the reasons or what are the excuses they gave for denying that something like this ever happened? So first reason that they gave was that the Islamic invasions were in fact welcomed by the lower castes, because upper castes in India were oppressing them, and Islam is a religion of equality. So all these statements are fundamentally wrong, but that is what they claimed. And they said that the lower castes in India actually welcomed the Islamic invasion. So now nothing can be farther from truth, because violence, rape, loot, plunder, everything, it was not done selectively. Only the upper castes were not looted or plundered or raped. Everybody suffered that. And all the castes together fought against the British. The resistance that I spoke about was due to the combined effort of all the castes. Like we spoke about the 21 kings who came together to defeat Sayyid Salar Masood. All of them were from the supposedly lower castes. None of them were Rajputs or Brahmins or something like that. They were all belonging to so-called lower castes. Someone who fought against and killed Muhammad Ghori, called Ramlal Khokhar, he belonged to a Khokhar Gotri Jat, again supposedly a lower caste. So there are hundreds of such examples. I mean, there is absolutely no point in saying that the lower caste welcome the Islamic invaders. Then they said that the temples were destroyed not for religious reasons, but for economic reasons, that they wanted the money and the loot from the temples. But again, there are many examples like Muhammad Ghazni, when he was looting the Somnath temple, the priest there told him that you already collected so much money, we'll give you some more money, but don't break our idol. Don't break the lingam. He told them that when I die and face Allah, I want to face him as a breaker of idols and not as a seller of idols. So it is very clear that the purpose behind breaking the temples was religious and not just economic. Economic was just by the way, but their main focus was religious. So again, this point doesn't hold any water. Their third argument was that Muslim chroniclers who came along with the sultans, they exaggerated all these acts just to please their masters. So the first question is, what kind of people those sultans must be that to please them, you have to exaggerate their acts of violence, loot, rape, and plunder. That is one part. And second part is many invaders like Timur or Babur, in their own autobiographies, they have written about all these acts with a lot of pride. Like Babur has said that I erected the towers of slain heads of people, something like that. So if they themselves have written, then this argument of chroniclers exaggerating things doesn't stand scrutiny. Another argument they made was that Turks as a race were barbaric. So it was not because of Islam, but not a religious issue, but a racial issue. That is what their argument was. Again, it falls flat because the first attack came from the Arabs, Muhammad bin Qasim. He did the same things. He also plundered, he also raped, he also broke the idols. Everything he has also done. So Arab has also done, Turk has also done. So Turks were were racially more violent. Makes no sense. Before the rise of Islam, the Turks were of Buddhist religion. And in that era, there is no record of them being exceptionally violent or barbaric. So this claim that Turks were racially violent, again, doesn't stand scrutiny. They also gave some examples of Hindu kings joining hands with Muslim kings. But such a one-off incident, somewhere such things have happened. But in Poland, Hitler had kept Jew guards to guard the Jews who were to be killed. That doesn't mean that Hitler had any love lost for the Jews. Similarly, in some peculiar situations, some Hindu king and Muslim king might have come together. But that doesn't negate a 1,000-year history of Islam attacking India to end idolatry and convert the entire population to Islam. Because that was, religion was their main purpose. And ending idolatry was the target with which they had come to India. So one-off incidents of Muslim king and Hindu king joining hands doesn't really change this entire flow of history that has happened in our country. Finally, when everything else failed, they said that no, everybody is same. Like Hindus destroyed, Muslims destroyed Hindu temples. Hindus had also destroyed Buddhist and Jain temples. So again, a completely fake and false narrative which they tried to create. In 400 Common Era, a Chinese traveler called Fai Yan had come to India. In the 6th century, Yuan Sang, another Chinese traveler, had come to India. And both of them stayed in a number of Buddhist vihars because they had come to study Buddhist texts and especially to learn Sanskrit to understand the Buddhist texts which were written in Sanskrit. And they have written their memoirs, and nowhere they have mentioned that Hindus had destroyed the Buddhist temples or vihars or chaityas or given any trouble to the Buddhists, nothing of that sort. All the historians who came at that time, chroniclers who came at that time, have only mentioned the peaceful coexistence between Buddhists, Jains, and Hindus. So this claim again, in fact, there were many times many historians have asked that give us some evidence of Hindus having destroyed Buddhist temples or Jain temples or the animist temples. And not a single evidence has ever been provided. Some incidences which happened locally, like a few years back, there was a narrative of church attacks which was created. But finally, it was found that those were Chutput local incidences where some street urchins had thrown some stones at churches. That doesn't mean that Hindus were attacking churches. So similar such incidences might have happened in the past, which were projected as big attacks by Hindus on Buddhist and Jain temples, which again has been disproved. So all these excuses that they gave for trying to negate the 1,000-year history of torture of Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists have all failed. And this needs to be established that this history cannot be denied. For the sake of peace today, you cannot deny what has happened in the past, because that will not result in peace. In fact, if you let history come up, if you let truth come up, then there is a possibility that there will be some catharsis, and the future will be peaceful and happy and prosperous. So we need to again create this, remove this distortion from our history, that nothing of rape, plunder, killings, and breaking of temples happened. We have to accept that these things happened. In fact, Hitler killed 6 million Jews, and even today the entire world feels sorry for that. There are this fact is not brushed under the carpet, but there are Holocaust museums in Germany and other parts of Europe where the memory of those who died is respected and preserved. And it shows the world that something like this should never happen. So why this dignity is denied to the people who died and suffered torture in the past? Only because they were Hindus? Only because they were Indians? What respect and dignity we give to the Jews, why can't we give the same respect and dignity to the Hindus? So that is why I think this is very important. Another false identity that was, I will try to wrap it up quickly, a couple of things. Another false identity that was imposed on us was that at the time when the British enslaved India, Hindu society had fallen to the lowest depths of moral degradation. So they talk of sati pratha, they talk of widow burning, they talk of various other things, and try to project that Hindus were a morally degraded kind of society at that time. The reason behind this is completely different. Why they felt necessary to do this? As I told you, the British East India Company came into India initially with the idea of only making money. They wanted to trade and make money. So initially, they had not given permission to the British missionaries to proselytize the locals in India. And the missionaries were very keen to get this permission. So they started this campaign to influence the public opinion in the UK or in Britain. And the public should put pressure on the government, and government puts pressure on the East India Company to allow the missionaries to continue with their activities in India. So to put pressure or to convince the people of England that missionary work is necessary and important in India, they projected Hinduism as a very, very degraded kind of religion. And they tried to convince the people that to save the Hindus from these inhuman practices, actually missionaries should go there and save the Hindus from this morally downgraded, degraded religion that is Hinduism. And just to convince the people, they blew up these cases of sati. Their own survey, East India Company's own survey, had found out that there were 4,000 cases of sati in 10 years. So about 400 cases per year, which also is very bad. I'm not saying that it is excusable or it should have been excused, no. But our own social reformers were campaigning against that. Our own people were saying that this should stop, and it would have stopped, definitely. In the rule of Peshwas, it was banned. Ahilyabai Holkar was very, very strongly against it. Bhagwan Swaminarayan in Gujarat was campaigning against it. So all over India, there were our own social reformers were fighting against it. But these 400 cases a year that used to happen, they started claiming figures like 50,000 widows are burned, 30,000 widows are burned, 80,000 widows are burned every year. So they started blowing up and, claiming any sort of figures just to convince people in UK that there is a need for missionaries to go to India and save Hindus from these practices. So purely out of self-interest, they created this narrative that Hinduism is a morally degraded, downgraded religion. Again, in my book, I have written very in detail about this and proved with concrete evidences that all these stories of widow burning were completely exaggerated only for this purpose. And now coming to the last point, we have been told that India was never a nation, but a group of warring kingdoms. The British unified it, and the founding values of independent India were created by India's non-violent freedom movement. So in essence, we are told that India won its freedom purely because of non-violent movement, अहिंसक movement. मतलब चरखा चला के अपने को आजादी मिली, हमको बताया गया। तो क्या यह सचमुच सही है? Very briefly, I'll tell you, I have written very in great detail about how this claim is completely baseless. But let me tell you in short, there were three movements that Congress carried out under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. Three big movements. One was the non-cooperation movement in the year 1920-21, which was essentially a Khilafat movement. It was not a non-cooperation, it was termed a non-cooperation movement, but its purpose was to save the Khilafat in Turkey. So why we were concerned with Khilafat in Turkey, no idea. Why Indian Muslims should be so worked up because of end of Khilafat in Turkey, very difficult to say. But Gandhiji unfortunately supported this claim by the Indian Muslims that Khilafat in Turkey should be saved. And he tied up his movement to this Khilafat cause. And this movement started in 1920, and by 1921-22, it had almost it was almost over. Neither Khilafat was saved because the British ended the Khilafat, nor freedom was won, because Gandhiji had said that because of this cause of Khilafat, Hindus and Muslims have come together. So now India will get independence in 1 year. That didn't happen. Khilafat didn't survive. It was a complete failure. That movement was a complete failure. The second big movement that they did was the Dandi Yatra, the salt agitation, as we call it. Mithacha Satyagraha in Marathi, we call it. There again, it was a very big media event all over the world. It gave huge publicity to the non-violent struggle. But after Gandhiji's arrest, it just collapsed. The entire movement finished in next 2 or 3 months. And after the movement, there was a Gandhi-Arvind Pact, in which there was no mention of freedom at all. Even in the demands that were put up, there was no mention of freedom. So freedom was not even an objective of that movement. And in the pact that took place after Gandhiji was released from prison, the tax on salt also was not taken back. So forget independence for the country, but the smallest target of that movement, that the salt was taxed and the tax should be cancelled, was also not accepted. So what a huge failure that movement was. The third movement was 1942. On the 9th of August, it was declared. On the same day, all the leaders were arrested. And there was no plan of how that movement should be carried forward. It was declared in a haste for various purposes. Main purpose was the rising popularity of Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose was becoming very popular and Congress was doing nothing. So just to show that we are also doing something, this Chale Jao movement was launched. And it was going nowhere. After everybody was arrested, the movement was, because British also were in no mood to mollycoddle the Congress at that time, because they were fighting a world war. So they crushed the movement. Practically, they crushed the movement. And in again a matter of months, that movement was over. So 3 movements they carried out with a gap of 10 years. 1920-21, 1931 and 1942. तो हर 10 साल के बाद जो मूवमेंट होता है उसमें से ऐसा कौन सा प्रेशर क्रिएट हुआ होगा ब्रिटिश राज के ऊपर कि that they found it inevitable to give freedom to India. Practically nothing. 3 movements with a gap of 10 years, each movement lasting only a couple of months and completely failing to achieve anything. So how can these 3 movements have led to India's independence? I mean, if you look at it logically, then there is no way that these movements have won independence for the country. And one final proof of this fact is that when Britain gave freedom to India, their Prime Minister was Sir Clement Attlee. And in 1952, he had come back to India and he stayed at Raj Bhavan in Calcutta as a guest of West Bengal's governor. And while talking, governor asked him that in 1947, what was such pressing need that you had to give independence to India? But 1942 movement had in any case collapsed. So he said that we gave independence to India only because of the pressure created by the Indian National Army of Subhash Chandra Bose, which led to revolts like the naval mutiny, which told us that now the Indian army is not going to be loyal to the British, and without their support, Britain can't rule India. So that's why we decided to quit. ये भी मैंने बहुत विस्तार से लिखा है मेरी किताब में. I have written in a very, very detailed way, giving all the references and evidences. Non-violent movement was in no way responsible for India's freedom, but Subhash Chandra Bose, Indian National Army, and the situation that was created because of that. Finally, Mr. Governor asked Clement Attlee that what part did Gandhiji's non-violent movement play in your decision to grant India freedom? So he smiled and he said minimal. He said there was a minimal impact of Gandhiji's non-violent movement on their decision. Now, even British Prime Minister who took the decision to grant India freedom, he himself says this, and still we insist that India got freedom because of non-violent movement. I think it's a murder of history, nothing else. So all these wrong narratives and wrong identities that were imposed on us have really seriously damaged our psyche. And it is very, very important to remove these misconceptions, to remove these distortions, and let India stand up as a very, very confident and forward-looking and powerful nation. And for this, ending distortions from history and communicating it to the people, I think that's very important, because एक किताब में वो लिखने से कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. This has to reach the masses. And in that, platforms like yours are going to play a very big role. So I'm very happy that I got this chance to speak to your audiences through your platform. I'm sure we'll continue this effort. And finally, the textbooks of history will also change. And from there, the narrative will be set, which is true and correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that very insightful talk that covered all bases regarding this video to some extent has become a beginner's guide to all perspectives of history. But just to play devil's advocate here, sir, sort of like 2 questions or 2 important topics that I'm going to fuse into one. First is, sir, that Baba Saheb Ambedkar ji, he was used by Gandhi as this mascot of like a Dalit hero who was on Gandhi's side. But that wasn't true. And it's quite apparent by his works and his commentaries, especially the BBC interview, where he talks about Clement Attlee's autobiography, saying INA was the reason for freedom. But at the same time, so the first question is basically how pivotal a role does Baba Saheb Ambedkar play in the whole scheme of things in terms of the role of radical freedom fighting that was done in India. And the second question is that Winston Churchill and Clement Attlee, even though they weren't the best of friends, there was a lot of threat by Gandhi that was felt by Winston Churchill, because there was constant condemnation that Winston Churchill did of Gandhi. So do you think Clement Attlee's autobiography saying that it was the radical freedom fighters, or saying that Gandhi's contribution was minimal, could somehow also have an ulterior motive?
Answer your second question first. I think Winston Churchill had a kind of dislike for Gandhi, because he was a man who respected power and strength. And I think he must have felt that this non-violent movement is some kind of, that is something which never appealed to him. So I don't think he was taking Gandhi very seriously. When Gandhi started his fast in the jail, in the comfortable jail that he used to be put in, Churchill had once inquired that, is the old man still alive? So that is a kind of, I think, a kind of contempt that he used to feel for Gandhi. So I don't think he ever took Gandhi as a very, very serious opponent. And actually, I don't think had any reason for having any ulterior motive in not giving credit to Gandhi if it was due. Because in fact, for the Britishers, it was a better narrative that they accepted the non-violent movement of Congress, and on their own, as true liberals, they handed over the reins of India to Congress. It showed them in better light than saying that we were scared of the naval mutiny and the Indian army revolting against us. It put us under huge stress, and that's why we went away. So if I was British, I would have preferred to tell the story to the world that we went respecting the non-violent movement. And since we were very liberal and open-minded, we handed over the power to Congress. But the fact remains that it was only because of the tremendous pressure that was created because of the Indian National Army, then the atmosphere that was created in India because of the Indian National Army's fight, the realization that came into the Indian soldiers who fought on the side of British in the Second World War. When they started hearing stories of the fight of Indian National Army, they also started feeling कि हमने क्या किया? When our own brothers were fighting for the independence of India, we were fighting on the side of the British. So they became very uncomfortable, and there was a lot of, the situation was boiling at that time, and because of that only the naval mutiny happened. And that really shook the British, because the only support on which the British ruled India was the loyalty of the British Army, Indian Army working for the British. Because as I said initially, from thousands of kilometers, there was no way they could have controlled India only by the military might. So they needed the loyalty of Indian soldiers. And once that was lost, they knew that their game was up. And that's why they left. Coming to Babasaheb Ambedkar, I think he was a fiercest critic of Gandhiji. If you compare, even nobody has criticized Gandhiji in such strong terms as Babasaheb Ambedkar has. There is a book which I will share with you when we meet. What Gandhi and Congress did to the untouchables, something like that is the title of the book. And he has kind of thrashed Gandhi. जबरदस्त criticism है गांधी जी के ऊपर. So Babasaheb Ambedkar being a Dalit icon of Congress is not the narrative which was in existence at any time. In fact, Congress made sure that Babasaheb was defeated in the elections. even post-independence. So Baba Sahib and Congress never got along together. And as far as the support to the radical freedom fighters is concerned, I'll just give you one example. In the Gandhi murder case, Swatantraveer Savarkar was also arrested. I'm sure you know that. And his advocate, one Mr. Bopatkar, he was fighting the case on behalf of Savarkar. He got a call once and he was told that I want to meet you. It was from a central minister. And he said that I want to meet you. So he said, okay, I'll come to your office or you come to my office. No, I will not meet you like that. At such and such place, I will be sitting in my car. You come there, sit in my car. We will take a round, and while traveling, I'll discuss. While commuting, I'll discuss. He didn't understand why something like this is being done. So he went there. He sat in the car. That minister told him that in the cabinet meeting, from the top, there is a lot of pressure that Savarkar must be somehow indicted in this case, and somehow he must be proved guilty. But I know that he is not guilty, and you will win the case, I'm very sure. And if you require anything, I will support you. Itna bol ke he got down and went away. The name of that minister was Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, and he was the law minister at that time. He was comparison between Gandhi and Savarkar. He was pro Savarkar but not pro Gandhi. And in fact he was pro the truth. I will put it that way. So he knew that Savarkar is not guilty, and he knew that he's trying to be trapped. There is a trap being laid for him. So he helped the advocate of Swatantraveer Savarkar. So that is the reality. Baba Sahib, being the Dalit icon of Congress, is farthest from any possibility.
One more question, sir. Since you mentioned Savarkar ji, I remember Rahul Gandhi once saying that हमारे गांधी हैं और आपके सावरकर हैं, to looking at the BJP pantheon. And that reminds me, sir, that for a revolution to happen in a way which causes us to look back into our history, nationalism is very important. But two major challenges that nationalism faces when history comes up is because there is proselytization is a very big part of it, and bigotry is a very big part of it. Uski wajah se, because there are these concepts of religious fraternity in Christianity and Islam, like Islam has the Ummah. So because of that, how exactly should an Indian Muslim or an Indian Christian navigate history? And secondly, sir, since you talked about inferiority complex in sports, where half the career of many players went into overcoming their complex, this concept of global citizen has come up, because the Western Hemisphere has already moved on from jingoism, nationalism in positive or negative terms. They start talking about being global citizens, breaking boundaries and all of this. So these are two things that are really dividing us. The second extension of the fraternity part being that when Rahul Gandhi says something like "Hamare Gandhi aur aapke Savarkar hain," there is this division of history as right-wing history and left-wing history. So how appropriate is it to divide the political arena as right-wing and left-wing, number one? And number two, isn't it a disservice to nationalist history to even do so?
Actually, Hamare Gandhi aur aapke Savarkar is not a left and right division, because Gandhi was in no way a leftist. Gandhi was a devout Hindu. He was thoroughly religious.
Mm-hmm.
He believed in Sanatan religion. In fact, Savarkar was the one who was anti-Varnashram.
Mm-hmm.
He was a social reformer. He fought against caste discrimination. And he said that Varnashram Vyavastha in the past might have been correct, but today we don't need it, and the Varna system should be ended. Whereas Gandhi was a staunch supporter of Varna system. So Gandhi leftist and Savarkar rightist is fundamentally a flawed kind of a division.
Mm.
And the Nehruvian Congress, of which Rahul Gandhi is a product,
Mm.
again, in no way connects with the Gandhian thought, because Gandhi was a product of Indian soil. There may be many rights and wrongs that he might have committed, but his connection with the Indian soil was not in doubt, never in doubt. Whereas this clan, Nehru and running up to Rahul Gandhi, their fundamental connect with the Indian soil itself is doubtful. And as we go along, by the time we reach Rahul Gandhi, I think the connect completely disappears. So they trying to own up the legacy of Gandhi is itself questionable. Whereas BJP owning up Savarkar's legacy is quite justified, because Savarkar was the one who articulated the thought of Hindutva, on which BJP stands today. So, आपके सावरकर, ये राहुल गांधी का बोलना सही है, but हमारे गांधी ये जो बोल रहा है, that has got no foundation. So that statement itself is wrong.
Very true, sir. Congress, Nehru's white cap shines red under the sun. So of course it can't be there can't be any association with Gandhi. Very
That's
true.
right.
Thank you very much for that session, sir. So much has been learned, and my notes have been extremely elaborative in this session. Thank you very much for that enriching experience. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Thank you.